Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Meredith Gershenson. I'm a research analyst here at workforce.com. As the slide suggests, we'll be talking a little bit about how to prevent an HR data breach. Today, I'm joined by Bo and Scott. Bo is our organizational specialist here at Workforce, and Scott is our information security officer. Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hey there. How are y'all?
Awesome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course, anytime. So we have just to give you guys a lay of the land, we have a little chat box to the right. If you go ahead and as you see, actually, Andrew Lewis, our video producer behind the scenes, just said hello. So I'll say hi. If you don't mind just dialing in or typing in where you're dialing in from. So I'm coming in from Chicago. Awesome. So feel free to drop in any questions, any comments, concerns. Hi, Marianne. Awesome. It's good to see you. Feel free to, if you have any technical problems, feel free to just tag Andrew, just at Andrew, and he will be sure to help you out. He'll message you privately. And then we do have a couple poll questions throughout the webinar. So those would just be popping up on the bottom left of your screen. They're going to range from anywhere from multiple choice, short response, anything like that. So be sure to keep an eye out on those. We do have an audit at the end for you guys, just to gauge how prepared your organization is in case of data breach. And we are offering a $100 Amazon gift card for anybody that fills it out. So for a lucky winner, be sure to keep an eye out on your inboxes. To give a little background on workforce.com, so we are a workforce management software company who specializes in scheduling and time and attendance. Our overarching goal is to really just help businesses and business leaders, frontline managers to make the best decisions for their company. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just go through the agenda a little bit. So we're going to go over what exactly is considered a breach, kind of the ins and the outs, internal versus external. We're going to go over the causes of a breach and what exactly to look out for from both an IT and an HR perspective. Some protocols and safeguards to help recover from a breach. I know that, we'll go over some really interesting looking graphs and some protocol safeguard checklists just to make sure that you got everything accounted for. And then finally, we'll go over some actionable solutions just to help prevent a future data breach. And without further ado, Scott, I'm going to kick it off to you.
Alrighty. Okay, sorry about that. I was on mute and a little technical difficulty. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm excited to see all the different places that are represented. Aiken's not too far from me here in Georgia, and I see Fort Myers, Florida, etc. So that's awesome that we have a good audience from many different areas. So to begin with, I think a lot of people, most people, I would say, this image you're looking at there, obviously Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, and the sneaky, nefarious data breach, right? So I think most people feel like the data breach is always someone, some elaborate hacker, and that they're spy, things like that. But in reality, there are a lot more common causes of data breach, and a lot of that is through things that we can control as HR professionals and security professionals. So the prevailing thought, is that the IT team is going to have all the answers, and they're the only ones who need to worry about data breaches. But really, that's misinformed. And they have their safeguards in place, but it's really everyone has a role to play in protecting data. And so this session is going to primarily be discussing HR data breaches. And for today, we're speaking primarily about PII, personal identifiable information. However, most organizations, the HR team holds keys to many other sets of data, such as payroll, customer lists, training programs, etc. Excuse me. So what is considered a data breach, right? And so a common definition is an incident where information is stolen or taken from a system without the knowledge or authorization of a system user, right? And so that's what we're typically thinking about when there's a data breach, that someone's and a data breach doesn't have to be a global all the data in the organization. It can be a simple file or an email, and I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But under the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is big in the EU and other outlying areas, the definition of a personal data breach is a little bit more defined, and it's either the accidental or unlawful loss or alteration of data. So it doesn't mean that the data has to be stolen and taken and something done with it. A data breach can be someone just coming in, messing with some stuff and leaving, right?
Yeah.
And so I think
there's really a lot of, sorry, if you don't mind me asking a question really quick.
Absolutely.
The data that is getting breached, if not for getting you locked out and preventing you from using it, what even is the ultimate goal of a hacker or a data breach individual? Yeah,
I've actually got a slide later on. We're going to kind of talk through that and about some different motivations of why. There's a couple of different subsets of hackers and why people would do such a thing. But in general, obviously, think about it this way, right? Security, you have private information. We want to make sure that everything is protected. And any time that information is not protected, whether it be through access, through a system, through an email, through a conversation being overheard. True story. I was in an environment recently, and I heard a man taking over the phone. He said, "Okay, your name is what?" Okay, and he repeated the name. And he said, "And your social security number is," and he read out the social security number. And I'm in a pretty much
public
place, and I'm like, "Is this guy for real?" I mean, this is if I was the person on the other end, I would be super irritated that someone was just throwing my information around like that. So, I mean, that's not what most people would define as a data breach, but in reality, that is a data breach. All right. We have any questions or anything yet? Nope.
What I love, what you said earlier is everybody really does have a role in helping to prevent data breaches. To kind of turn it towards the audience, I'd love to hear what everybody's role is. Are you all in HR? Are some people in IT, HRIS? Feel free to drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great information to understand.
Yeah.
So let me kick it to the next slide. Maybe a little IT help. There we go. All right. So there, you basically have internal and external data breaches, right? Or we'll just call them breaches. And so there are plenty of common internal types, and we'll talk about those, and we'll also talk about some pretty common external types. So as you would imagine, an internal type, it comes from within your organization or someone who may already have access to some data. One of the more common ones is, and I think this is fairly widespread, is people just misusing their access privileges. Matter of fact, I heard a guy the other day in a different spot said, "Hey, yeah, I'll get you on to my system. I'll just give you my username and password." Right. I mean, so I think that's one of the more common ones, right? So although the person who may be sharing that information or receiving the information may not have ill intent, technically that's still a data breach or a breach of protocol, because someone else is using someone else's credentials potentially in a system that the permissions are not set for that. And so that's a real typical example of some things to look out for, particularly as HR professionals. Another pretty common item is people, lose assets. I'm super paranoid, especially with my role in my organization, being the information security officer. I really don't want to lose my machine, right? And so, but I do, have to transport it in the car, and whenever I have to run in somewhere, or if I'm at the gym or wherever I may be, I'm double checking, triple checking that I've got that bag locked and it's got something over top of it. But I do have, as bad as that would be to have that stolen, obviously I have protections on my machine, and everybody should, make sure that you have some sort of screen lockout, permission to get in there, a PIN, or some sort of protocol, to make sure that the person trying to access the machine doesn't indeed have the authorization through authentication to do that. So I'll pause for a second. Bo, you got something to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask, how effective do you think that password authentications work for like a laptop or a cell phone or your different devices?
So we'll talk about that in another slide, but I think yes, there are certainly two-factor authentication, which I'll mention here in a little bit, is a huge prevailing subset of protections that has recently come on and it's become very popular. But yeah, I mean, right. I think if we have the right passwords, and we'll talk about password integrity and stuff like that in a slide or two. But yeah, it does have its intent if you are doing it right. But you have biometrics, all kinds of different ways to access a machine. But people leaving those or losing those is also a very common internal issue. Miscellaneous errors, misdirected email. All right. Looked at a study in an average organization or in organizations between 250 and 999 employees. On average, there are 500 misdirected emails annually.
Oh my gosh.
So think about your organization and its size and try to do the math on that. There's probably a lot. I would be lying if I said I never did it. But it's one of those things that we, in my 30-year career, I'm sure I have sent an email or two to someone who was not intended to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure, emailing within your organization. I know a lot of systems now, particularly email systems, will prompt you and let you know that someone is outside of your domain if you're sending an email, which is very helpful. And make sure, because a lot of people's names are similar, and making sure you have the right recipient in the in the address bar is critical. So, true story happened last year. I found an email. I was, again, I didn't have any bad intentions. I was actually trying to find this information, but this is a scary example of how an email that is sent to the wrong person could end up causing a big problem. So I found this email that I needed for some information. I called up and said, "Hey, my name is Scott." I don't even think I said my name. I gave him the company name, and she said, "Okay, well, I've got two people listed here. Which one are you?" And so I said, "Scott." And she said, "Okay, well," I said, "Well, I've lost my username and my password, and I'm not sure if I can get back in there." She's like, "Okay, well, let me reset your username, and I'll reset your password." And she told me this stuff over the phone, never qualifying or authenticating my identity. And to further add insult, I guess you could say, she actually walked me through the system and how to unmask account numbers and social security numbers for the report I needed. So again, she was trying to be helpful on her end, but she had no idea who I was and if I was the authentic person. So that's a big, so I know in HR, a lot of times you get requests for people saying, "Hey, can you send me my W-2?" Right? So I don't know if is there any way to raise a hand on here? So I'm sure right now in this time of the year, everybody on this call who's in HR has had someone say, "Hey, I need my W-2."
Right.
Well, think about
I've probably said that too.
Yeah, exactly. I would ask everybody to take a second and think about what is your protocol for
Mhm.
issuing that through an email. What are you
Yeah.
using to authenticate?
Yeah, I think the key there too, Scott, is protocol, right?
Yep.
Because what you don't want to get lost in the safety and prevention aspects of it is that initial desire that's fueling that action, which is that they genuinely want to help you, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
we don't want to discourage our employees from helping each other. We don't want to discourage our HR department from getting the necessary documents that the employees need. We just
Mhm.
need to get a better system where these internal breaches, we're preventing them while also maintaining a good work environment and getting the information that people obviously need.
I think, what I love about Marianne's statement in the chat, she said, send them to a payroll provider. And I think that's a really good idea in terms of they probably have maybe more of a protocol, but at the same time, there's a lot of people picking up the pieces and making sure that everybody across the organization has their security questions in place, knows what should be protected, knows who should be answering to who. I mean, that's key, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what everybody needs to understand, and I'm sure you do, but just from a someone's provided an identity, right? And they're saying, all right, this is who I am, and this is what I'm requesting. So we need to have an authentication method on our end. And then
Yeah.
even once it is authenticated, how do we get that information to them? And we'll talk a
Mhm.
little bit
Yeah.
later in the program about the doctrine of information sharing within each organization.
Yep.
So do we have a protocol to, if someone says just email it to me? Well, most people aren't going to want to email, or at least any HR professionals shouldn't want to email an unencrypted W-2, right?
Yeah.
And to what address, right? So there's all kinds of things that we need to be thinking about from a security and HR perspective when we're handling this PII, right? All right, moving on. External. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about internal right now? If you do, just pop them up there. And Meredith, I'm talking and looking at my notes. So if you see anything pop up, let me know, and we'll try to address it.
Yep.
And so external, this is another way. This is more of the nefarious type, right? These are people who are actually trying to defraud the company in some way. And there excuse me, there are what's called brute force attacks that really just go after password, and they're just pounding the system, trying to understand, can we hack these passwords? So you'll notice most systems these days have a counter measure to that, where if a password is attempted more than 3 times, then the system's going to lock out that user, and then the user is going to have to get through a much more rigorous protocol to get that user account reactivated. But if you don't have that, make sure your systems that you're using do have such protocols in place that after a certain amount of attempts, the account would be locked, and that's going to be protective of everyone. And I know as a user, it may be a pain, but it's also in my best interest, and so I can understand that from as an employee or even from as a customer. If I'm trying to get into my bank account or something like that, we want to make sure that the companies that we're dealing with are handling our information properly. Another one that's really prevalent these days is phishing, and then even more defined is the spear phishing, right? So phishing is the clickbait, so you get something that comes up in your email and says, hey, click here to do this. And what those attacks are trying to most times install some sort of malware on your system so they could possibly penetrate your network, do some keyboard tracking, things like that. And so it's important to make sure that your teams are trained on not to if they find a suspicious looking email, they need to run that through their IT department or through their manager before they click on it, because that can end up with some devastating results if and if that comes into play, we're going to have to go into an incident response, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Any input, any questions?
Actually, you know what? Robert Mills in the chat, he just said, we had spoofed emails to HR asking to change the bank account on direct deposits. I'm assuming that this would be an external threat. Would it kind of categorize under any of these four?
Yeah, I think that would certainly be, type of a type of an attack that would be defined as an external attack, and clearly that anybody there is trying to, obviously bank account and direct deposit information. Wow. Okay. Wonder what they're trying to do.
Right.
We want to redirect, right? And so, and the last is that I wanted to just talk about real quick, and this isn't really technically a breach, but it is a big problem, and that's a distributed denial of service attack. And basically that comes from some of this phishing as well, where we get in there, or the malware gets in there and allows all these bots to basically overload the system, and basically renders the system overload. And it's denying of service it's kind of what the DOS is there. So anyway, those are some points that we want to make sure we're just kind of aware of. And I think from an HR perspective, the one that we can probably be most proactive on is the phishing, and educating our teams to make sure that they're not, clicking on emails that weren't referred to them, or that they don't recognize.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and,
I think we got another question too.
Go ahead.
Which is from Mark. Mark asked, do you have any tips on protocol for training general managers for if employees call in to get schedule updates and make changes, and it's not the actual employee? My recommendation, Mark, is that there shouldn't be any training at all, that people should not be calling in to do that. The access should be online. It should be authenticated on the employee side so that they can come in, see their own schedule, request time off, or request shift swaps, things like that. If things are still happening outside of your scheduling system, I think that's a big red flag, that the protocol should be that it should all live within the system. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, I just think, obviously we're making an assumption there that was it Mark, that Mark has, maybe they're not on a platform at this point. Maybe they're using some
other, that's fair,
a little bit more antiquated or method for scheduling. But yeah, I mean, to your point, a robust system is going to allow for all that stuff to be acted on through the device, and obviously the user would be authenticated through their access to their system. So, but yeah, that's a great question. Great answer, Bo. Can we move on?
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about kind of how data breaches happen, what they kind of their impacts, but really, I mean, I look at the news all the time. I read the paper, and it's crazy to think how much this is, the prevalence of data breaches is in the news. I mean, it seems like almost every day you see this company had a breach, this company had a hack. All this stuff is just really prevalent, and so it's really important to make sure, number one, your security teams, your IT teams, your HR teams, and your vendors are very aware of all this stuff, because we don't want to be the next headline, right?
Right.
And I think the poll question here is, do you recognize your industry in this graph? I mean, there's a lot of industries represented there, and the dollar amounts are insane. And so, those are just kind of the hard dollars, right? Think about all of the opportunity costs, the damage to reputation, and things that just linger for years.
to quickly call out, two of the industries that we work with directly is healthcare and hospitality and entertainment. I mean, if you see in the healthcare, the very top one, they are spending north of $9 million just trying to recover from data breaches solely in 2021. Hospitality, which is second to last on the bottom, north of 3 million, which is one of the biggest business sectors that has been impacted by COVID. And the last thing that I know that they want to do is spend money figuring out how to recover from a data breach, right? And then if you look at entertainment sector, that is almost $4 million just spent in 2021. And so it's interesting. I was looking at this graph and I was comparing it to another graph that I saw, and it was saying how I think 86% of organizations have been impacted by a data breach, whether they know it or not. And that's kind of the scary aspect of it. And, we asked a poll question earlier, whether your organization has ever encountered a data breach, and many were not sure, so it's something, it's hard to look out for, to say the least, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of malware that can go into your system and sit there for a long time and just send out stuff. And unless you have a scanning capability, or if your IT team is doing some scanning protocols every now and again, that stuff can live in there for a while and propagate and infect other machines, et cetera. Very interesting. And I don't know what the definition of a small business was in this particular article, but Cybercrime Magazine noted that 60% of small companies that are impacted by a data breach go out of business within 6 months.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
scary. I mean, that's a scary thing to think about. I'm not sure like I said, I'm not sure what the definition is on that particular article. But 60% of small companies that are affected go out of business. I mean, that's a huge, that's a wake up call, right?
That's horrible.
Everybody
Yeah.
really needs to be paying attention.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and again, I think we can move on from this slide, but I think beyond the hard dollar costs that you see associated here, I think, obviously going out of business would be probably the worst case. The financial is tough, but the reputational damage is a lot of times very tough to overcome. And you might not go out of business, but it might be something that is really hard to recover from. It could take years. So again,
Marianne had a point in the chat. She said, wow, no data breach, we have had some issues with fraud with our corporate bank account. Do you have any thoughts on that matter, Scott?
Yeah, not really. I mean, other than, that's not really my area, but, corporate bank account, the accounting team and the risk team, I'm sure are all over that. And, but again, I would imagine that somewhere through that, while it might be termed data breach, if there's some fraud going on under the data laws, I'm sure some laws were broken with sharing of information and things like that outside of intended users. So,
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Fraud doesn't happen without a little bit of information.
Well, absolutely. And so it's kind of funny that question just kind of pushed us off over to here. So what we're looking at here is the world's most famous hacker or infamous hacker. All right. So this is Kevin Mitnick. And he is, like I said, the most well-known hacker in the world. He started out young, spoofing bus tickets so he could ride for free, graduated to a bunch of other things. His biggest accomplishment, or I wouldn't call it accomplishment, but his most notorious act was when he was on the run from the FBI. He was already being sought after by the FBI for various other hacks that he had been that they were trying to talk to him about. But he was on the run, and he was worried about, and this was in the early 90s, he was worried about the FBI's ability to track him by his phone. And again, back then, cell phones were a lot different, but there were, of the time, there were the state of the art phones at that time. And Kevin's like, you know what? I'm really interested in this phone. And it was called the MicroTac Ultralight. And so he figured he's like, this is the most state of the art phone there is. I'm curious. I wonder if I could maybe get their source code. So he went through some hoops, talked to some people at Motorola. Long story short, he ended up convincing the product manager's secretary that he was part of the Motorola organization, and he was aware that the product manager had just left on a 2-week vacation, and basically told the assistant that, hey, I know she was getting ready to leave, and she promised me she'd give me the code before she left. It sounds like she left. Anyway, as you can guess, this person, he fooled this person into giving him this access. And the files were sent to him FTP outside the system. Matter of fact, they actually recognized that he was not part of the system, and actually he convinced them to jump through some other hoops to get him the information, or the source code. So he was successful in getting that source code. A couple years later, when he was actually apprehended, he was found in possession of over 100 cloned cell phones. So that's pretty amazing. After serving 5 years in prison, though, he has redeemed himself and is now one of the works with the authorities and actually has his own security company. You can read about this guy. You can look on YouTube about him. Pretty amazing. But this is really an example of simplicity, right? He didn't go through, he didn't do any sort of web hacking. He basically made some phone calls and was provided the information, which is what it, kind of goes back to, I think, Mark's. Well, it's in the same vein as what Mark was talking about, people calling. So, we need to verify voice as well, right? And it's tough to do, but you need to have some sort of information that you can authenticate on their end, on your end, against this person to make sure you're actually talking to the right person. So we did mention the types of hackers and motivations, right? Obviously, Kevin's motivation in this particular instance was to stay out of jail. He had already been a successful hacker, and people had really, the FBI he was on the FBI's most wanted list. But a lot of people, generic hackers, actually are doing it more for the thrill of getting in. And they're somewhat benign in their cause, and more of a curious, kind of mimicking Mitnick, because Mitnick, when he first started, he was not doing it for extortion or anything like that. He just was wanting to see if he could do it. Mm-hmm. But then you also have criminals, right? Criminal cyber activity. They're looking to make financial gain. So if your organization deals a lot of particularly the HR team, and then whoever brought up the direct deposit information, all that, that's a really good point. Working in HR for as long as I had, we used to have protocols for when someone needed to update their direct deposit. I know with a lot of HRS systems today, employee self-service allows the employee to do that on their own. So that's really what I would recommend. If someone, you may have to get through the process of reestablishing their credentials, because a lot of employees really don't spend a lot of time in their HR payroll or in their HRS platform, except for where they need to view pay stubs and maybe update some information. So, but yeah, right. Having a system that allows for that employee self-service is hugely important. Mm-hmm. And then you also have what they call hacktivists, right? So these people have an agenda. So I don't know what exactly what industries are represented here, but if you're in an industry that some group or basically a group has some sort of grievance against, they could be coming after you just to to hurt you, to harm you, because they don't like what you're doing, and they're going to go out and they're going to try to cause damage to your company, to your
Interesting.
reputation. So, and then the worst of all, and really, I think anybody on this call, myself included, is kind of helpless against this. And this would be nation state attacks, right? Military, where they're coming in. We've heard a lot about, international hacking, and it's always in the news. But yeah, if you've got a military industrial complex behind you trying to hack into your system, you're going to have some difficulties defending it, but it's not impossible. All right. But again, those are kind of the types of hackers that you might come across, and the reasons why they would probably do hacking.
Right.
Any comments, questions? All right. So by show of hands, I don't know if anybody can, we don't have that on this particular platform, but I'm curious. I assume a lot of people, if not all on this, have an actual HRIS system that allows for, for HR professionals to get in and manage employee profiles, et cetera. One of the most important things about that is making sure your roles, permissions, and visibilities are all set up correctly. And that starts at the beginning of the design of the outset of establishing an HRIS system.
Yeah. It seems like, according to the poll, that majority are already saying that, yes, they have a HRIS role in place within their organization.
Yeah. And so, exactly. And so, as a default, right, when you're setting up a new role, you want to make sure it has least privilege, meaning the opposite of just opening up the shop to everybody. You want to make sure that everything is controlled, and as things are needed, or if people need additional access, that's reviewed by the right teams. The HRIS team can update those roles and permissions within the profiles, and people can do their jobs. I think that's one of the things that people in my former roles, particularly when I was the VP of HRIS for a large company, a lot of people felt like we were trying to be impediments to their activity. It's like, I just need to get this done. I need to be able to do this. And it was like, understand, but we have to go through the proper protocols and understandings and vet why this is necessary, and can it be done by someone else. This is all cultural. It's all part of, your organization's tolerance for risk as well. Some organizations are like, yeah, we need to give our managers as much access. So do that, but also
your desire to move fast.
Yeah, exactly.
That's I think, my experience is the people who are trying to make those decisions are just trying to get to point A to point B as quickly as possible. And access is really one of the easiest ways to do that.
Exactly.
But it's not always the safest, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm all for that. So there's got to be that balance there, right?
For sure.
You can't just open up the storefront to everybody and assume that they're just going to view what they're looking for. So, a common example that we used to have, and this is something that I'm curious if anybody on this call has ever had, where and again, this isn't necessarily a security event. This is more of a morale event, where, the wrong person saw the wages for a coworker or someone in a similar role, and now that's become a matter of consternation for that employee and possibly for a team, right? Depending on, but that does create an HR event. And so, making sure that people have the proper accesses within your HRIS system is critical. And, making sure that the teams are trained properly on how to permission and provision these roles, et cetera. So think about all the information that is in an HRIS system.
Right.
You've got date of birth, social security number, dependents, social security numbers. It is a huge target for potential hackers or anybody who wants to get in. if someone gets in there, a disgruntled HR person, if they have the wrong permissions, they want to go ahead and try to harm the company. If they have the wrong permissions and there's not protocol set up on the back end within your systems, they could download the entire database of account information.
Wow.
These reports are not difficult to get out of an HRIS system with the proper permissions. So I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that your teams are properly trained on how to access those reports and what information within those reports should be available to each particular role.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on that? All right, we'll move over to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So worst case scenario here, we've had some sort of hack, right? Or we've had some sort of compromise.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for every business to make sure that you have a business continuity plan. The little thing keeps popping up. All right. So, the business continuity plan, which basically means, how are you going to respond in case of some sort of denial of service, your data is breached or it's lost. How are you going to verify that your data, even if it's been breached, if it's been altered, right? So those are things that everybody needs to be paying attention to. And again, these are probably outside of the scope of HR professional, but from a risk in IT perspective, most organizations are going to have, if you have in fact a security and IT team. In some cases, they fall upon the HR team. I don't know. Every business is, just like people, every business is different. But regardless, it's very important to have a business continuity plan and an incident recovery plan. And that's going to be made up of an incident response team. And know how your department interacts with that team in case there is any sort of issue.
So really quick, just going through this whole checklist as a whole, looking over it, what are some main differences between what HR should be looking for versus what maybe someone in IT or HRIS should be looking for?
I'm not sure I got that 100%. So can you repeat that?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of some, key processes or maybe some admin work differences between HR versus IT, is there any differences that they should be looking out for kind of when going over this procedural safeguard?
Yeah, so the IT and security teams, they're going to have backups and they're going to have things like that they can restore. From the HR team, one of the most devastating things that can happen is, your system's down or it can't be utilized, right? So do you have a plan to conduct business, that going back to that business continuity plan? Let's say let's just say a time and attendance system goes down for a period of time because it's been altered or hacked and you can't rely on the data. Do you have a backup? Do you have a backup plan? What is your backup plan for how you're going to collect time in produce payroll? Because if doesn't matter to the
pieces of paper.
Yeah, exactly. Spreadsheets. It doesn't matter to the employee. Well, it does, but at the end of the day, the employee still wants to get paid. And so, as the HR team or the payroll team, you got to have a provision in place to implement, and it doesn't. There needs to be some basic training on that, and some acknowledgement from the field that needs to understand, hey, in case system goes down, these are the protocols we need to do because we have to continue to capture time. People need to continue to work, and again, this is all a little bit more industry specific. Specific, or even profession specific. A heavy hourly labor organization that is going to be more impacted, obviously, than a primarily salaried organization in a time and attendance.
Yeah.
system.
Really quick to follow up on that. Mark had another awesome question. Mark, I love these questions. Keep them coming. He asked, we have had to deal with a former disgruntled employee in California trying to claim that they didn't get their breaks. Which team would you recommend take charge of the recovery plan? And Scott, before I hand it off to you, I mean, we see that a lot with a lot of our clients in California. Compliance is huge, and obviously with California laws, it's really hard to keep that in order. So that's something that we actually do really well here. But Scott, I wonder if you have any thoughts on kind of which team Mark should recommend take charge of that recovery plan.
Okay, so I've been through this, and it's painful. Because as the organization, we know that this person actually got their break. The problem was it wasn't documented. So in reality, it's very difficult to go back and retrace that unless you have a system, something like not to. I'm just going to say it, workforce.com, right? I mean, that would certainly. I mean, we have that integration built into our platform where it allows for all that stuff to be captured. If people miss a break, if they, penalties, all the California, if you work over 6 hours and all that stuff, that's all baked into our system already. So, but as far as trying to go back through the process and try to prove that this person took a break, that's going to be a tough road to hoe unless you have some witnesses that can attest to that. And it's probably going to be it's not going to be one instance, right? Again, you get a good time and attendance system that will do that. But as far as who should take the lead on that, I think that's a collaborative effort between the operations team and the HR team. Try to get in there, mitigate it, and obviously if that's a current step that's going on right now, if that's a current case, you need to have some remediation in place starting today to keep that from going, because if you go back and you have to settle with this person, next thing you know, everybody in the block's going to be wanting their piece of the pie. It's tough to go back, but going forward today, starting today, you can take some steps by looking at some systems that may help you alleviate that in the future. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but having lived through that is extremely painful, and good luck.
Yeah. Scott, to kind of sum up this slide, what are some major takeaways here before we pass it off to Bo?
Well, I've got a couple of more points here, unless we're running low on time. We are kind of running short on time. Sorry. I told you I talk a lot. But real quick, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that your organization needs to have some procedural safeguards, right? Does your organization require training on IT and handling of information? Does your company have alerts in your email system that say, hey, you're sending identified information, data loss prevention, you're sending recognized information outside of our domain. Are you sure this is what needs to happen? And if it does, then, your IT team should probably get, or security team should get some sort of flag within your platform to say, hey, this person sent this email, follow up on it, figure out what the purpose cause was, and just verify that it's legitimate, and nip that in the bud in case it gets has any nefarious activity around it. I mentioned it really quickly. I'm going to run through it. Passwords in general, longer is stronger, right? So a longer password is a stronger password. Two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. You can have Google Authenticator put on your devices. A lot of systems allow for using your mobile device to get the code. That two-factor authentication is a huge, it really that extra layer of protection provides a lot of value. Seemingly, but you have to have that device in your hand. So even someone has your password, unless they have your phone or your, something like that, they're not going to be able to get in.
Right.
And then obviously, sharing PII and saving it and sharing it, right? Make sure your company has a protocol for how you're going to deliver that information. If someone asks for your W-2, you don't just sling it through an email unprotected. And then, have a protocol, make everybody take a pledge. I promise not to click on things I don't know what they are, right?
Right. Make them repeat it back to you.
Yeah, we want to keep
Make
those
sure that
fish in
it's
the tank.
fully, make sure it's fully understood.
Yeah. And the last thing on this particular slide is even when you are clicking through something that you are intending to install, make sure that you read the fine print. A lot of times it'll say, by agreeing here, you're giving access to X, right? And I think the most common one is like, if you're downloading something on your phone, it'll say, by clicking this, you're giving Google access to your email, to your photographs, or all that stuff. Make sure you're paying attention to that. Make sure you're okay with what those messages are.
Yeah. Recently, I've been getting the one that I think is a new development, but asking app not to track my activity.
Yep, exactly.
Which, I forget which company came out and said it, but they blamed Apple for that feature for their revenue ad going down an egregious amount. Yeah. Because they're no longer tracking, activity on these particular, applications, and so they're not targeting their ads to near the degree that they were, and so you see a significant decrease in revenue.
A lot of companies are mad at Apple.
Yeah.
Currently.
And real quick, I, from a behavioral standpoint, I would beg to, I would guess. I know that for most people, if you're installing something on your own device versus the company device, you're probably looking at it a little closer. All I'm asking is take the same precaution the same precautions you're going to take with your personal data, with your company's systems you have access to, because that makes all the difference in the world trying to help prevent some of this stuff. So,
definitely.
All right, Bo, thank you.
Yeah. So really quick,
that was great.
Just to dive into a case study of how ransomwares can go wrong. Pretty recently, there was an attack on UKG Kronos. Just to describe a very high-level overview of what happened, you can store data as a whole generally in three different ways: a personal server, which might be at your company's actual location; at a hosted server, which in this instance, Kronos was hosting the server for companies. And then you have the third party, which is like an Amazon AWS kind of server, typically referenced to cloud platforms and things. Basically what had happened is this second type, which is a vendor hosted server, it got attacked. They noticed some information that was going awry. They had to shut it down, and they went into a ransomware attack. Crazy thing about a ransomware attack is, back to my question from Scott at the beginning, they weren't necessarily doing anything or, crazy with the data that they grabbed. What they did was lock everyone out.
Yeah, so they basically they just encrypt everything.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I've got the key. If you want to if you want me to release this data,
right,
I'll give you the encryption key or decryption key, and you can get it back. Because the data is still there. They just have encrypted it so that only they have the key to read it. Right.
And so now you have every business who's on this server who now does not have access to that data. It's not like they've lost any money, but what they're losing is business continuity. I was talking to a coworker before we did this, and it's basically thinking about this morning, and I really wanted to make the reference to the fall of Constantinople. The fall of Constantinople was, in a lot of ways, the inflection point for when in European countries we stopped worrying about walling up our cities. Constantinople fell because the way that they were defending themselves was no longer accurate on how they could, continue their country and the way that they're promoting their safety. The same way that data is now managed, we have old ways of protecting it, which is internal servers or servers hosted by vendors. A lot of the times, that is no longer the safe way to do it. The same way that, walling up our cities is no longer the opportunity that it once was. We have to make sure that we are collectivizing our resources when it comes to data safety and moving products into the cloud.
Definitely.
Part of this next slide, it's just kind of a lot of the different countries. We can see different companies like the MTA or healthcare workers, universities. You're talking about a lot of different industries, companies, nonprofits, universities that are all experiencing business disruption, which is
even the city of Dallas had
right.
impact, like whole cities are being impacted.
Yeah, imagine if you had all of this information stored in that opportunity or that server, you're getting stopped on the train, not allowed in your building, all the different ways that, you could stop this business continuity.
Awesome. Scott, back to you.
Okay, so we are running very short on time, so I'm going to kind of blow through this last slide a little bit. Obviously, if anyone wants any more information, reach out to Meredith. We can, certainly follow up.
Definitely.
But, getting back to, actionable solutions, things that you guys as the audience can do. Every system that you're operating should be reviewed. SOC 2 is the Service Organization Control compliance standard. If you don't have that policy in place within your organization, you can look to have that put in place. More importantly, you want to be checking your vendors to make sure that they have SOC 2 compliance, particularly if you're dealing with software and things like that. You want to avoid systems with unnecessary weaknesses, confusing logins, multiple apps, etc. Obviously, someone who had a large recent data breach, probably want to steer clear of them. Downtime, I think, is a huge impact that people don't think about. They just assume that because it's a software, they're always going to be up. Uptime is a huge metric in our industry, and you want to be shooting for 99.99% is the kind of the standard. And then lastly, this goes back to more of a protocol for HR. Make sure the folks that you are on your teams or you're doing background checks, and particularly for people handling financial information, credit checks is also part of that, should be part of that background check.
It's really great to see. We had a poll question, short response. Does your company have a safeguard in place in case of a breach? If so, what's the first step? Somebody said strong training by I'm assuming IT department to help employees recognize phishing, etc. Contact IT department to stop what we were doing. So I think there's some strong first steps out there. It's just about flushing it out a little more and making it foolproof completely.
Yeah, and last thing on this slide, I just wanted to point out is make sure you have a good offboarding process. A lot of times people leave an organization, they may have access to some one-off platform that's not used a lot. Make sure you have a strong offboarding protocol for when someone does leave the organization, particularly if they're invited to leave, so to speak.
Awesome.
All right, Bo, I think you get the last slide, and then we're about at time. So
yeah, just a quick highlighting the workforce.com uptime. As we can see, we pride ourselves on that 99.9. You can see green pastures across the last 3 months for uptime. So just a little tidbit to throw in there.
Definitely. We highlighted a lot of
proud of, so.
Right, exactly. It's great. As we close it out, I did leave my email in the chat box. Feel free to follow up with me if you guys have any other questions. If you had any, want any resources, the recording, feel free to message me. We'll also have somebody from the team following up with all that information, a nice little goodie bag of everything with the webinar. We do have a little handout for you guys, an audit just to see how prepared your organization is. Feel free to take it. We are offering, again, a $100 Amazon gift card to a lucky winner. So feel free to keep an eye out on your inboxes for that one. And yeah, without further ado, Bo and Scott, thank you guys so much for coming on. I know I learned a lot. I hope our audience had some good takeaways from this as well. To everybody that stayed on, thank you. And we'll hope to see you at the next one.
Thanks
All right,
so much.
real quick, I want to just answer this question. What's the most commonly used characters when characters are required? It looks like everybody, well, the majority got that response, and it is the exclamation point. So use some other stuff.
Awesome.
Use that $sign. All right,
yeah,
everyone.
Mix it up a little bit. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.